Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and sensed they were smiling on the outside while hiding something sharp beneath? They call you friend. They laugh at your jokes. But something feels off. Not loud, not obvious. Just a subtle tightening in your gut. Like your soul knows what your mind can't explain. Carl Jung had a name for this tension: the shadow. And today, we're going to uncover 10 chilling signs that someone close to you may secretly resent you, even if they never say a word. Before we dive in, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt drained after spending time with someone who claimed to support you? Drop a thought in the comments if this video resonates, because you might not be imagining it. Now, let's begin. Sign number 1. They can't truly celebrate your success, and you can feel it. Success is supposed to be shared. At least that's what we're taught. When you win, your people cheer. When something finally clicks, the promotion, the relationship, the breakthrough, those closest to you should feel proud, right? But sometimes, the room goes quiet. The texts feel a little delayed. The tone of voice becomes flat. The enthusiasm in their words doesn't quite match the moment. They say, "That's great," but it lands cold. Their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. You notice it, not immediately, but viscerally. It's subtle, like a draft through a closed window. Something shifts. The moment that should feel shared suddenly feels lonely. You start wondering if you're overthinking it. Maybe they're just distracted. Maybe I caught them on a weird day. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But let me tell you, you're not. You're intuitive. And Carl Jung would say you're picking up on something real. Something the conscious mind can't quite name, but the unconscious has already clocked. What you're sensing is the absence of joy. And that absence says more than 1,000 hollow congratulations ever could. This person, friend, sibling, co-worker, even partner, might like you. They might love you. But that doesn't mean they want to see you thrive. Not really. Not if your growth makes them feel small. And when it does, when does your light expose their shadows? That's when something dangerous begins to brew. Resentment. It won't always look like jealousy. Most of the time, it won't look like anything. That's the trick. This kind of hidden hostility is dressed in politeness. It's layered under polite nods and half-hearted applause. It hides behind the mask of, "I'm so happy for you," while their eyes drift to the floor. You see, people don't always hate you for doing wrong. Sometimes they resent you for doing right, especially when your growth highlights their stagnation. Jung called this projection of the shadow, when someone can't bear to face their own shortcomings, so they silently displace that pain onto you. You didn't ask for this. You didn't show off. You didn't try to outshine anyone. You simply grew. You evolved. You dared to go after something. And worst of all, you got it. Now they can't meet you in your joy. Instead, they downplay it. They change the subject. They make jokes. They remind you it's not that big of a deal. Or worse, they pivot the conversation back to themselves. You say, "I finally got that opportunity I worked so hard for." And they reply, "Yeah, I did something similar last year. Anyway." It stings. Not because you need applause, not because you crave attention, but because deep down, you hope they'd be proud of you. You hope they'd celebrate with you, not compete, not deflect, not quietly shut down. But Jung teaches us something vital here. When someone cannot celebrate your success, it says far more about their unhealed wounds than it does about you. People who are secure in themselves, who are grounded in their worth, they love watching others win. They see your elevation as proof that it's possible for them too. They don't get smaller in your shine. They stand beside it. They cheer louder. They amplify it. But those who haven't done their inner work, those who live in comparison, fear, inadequacy, they take your success personally, as a reflection of what they haven't done, as a mirror to everything they've avoided. So instead of celebrating, they silently shut down. And that shutdown, that's your sign. Because resentment doesn't always show up with a slammed door. Sometimes it shows up in silence, in muted joy, in forced smiles, in the energy that sinks instead of rises. Jung would remind us the inability to rejoice in others is a shadow trait, a symptom of a soul that has yet to reconcile with its lack. When someone can't clap for you, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because you've done something they're still afraid to do. You've taken a risk. You've stepped into something that requires courage. You've gone further than they dared to. And that difference becomes unbearable for them to witness. And you will try to rationalize it. You will try to excuse their coldness. But the body knows. Your nervous system will register their subtle distancing before your mind can explain it away. Because resentment leaks. No matter how carefully someone hides it, the soul knows when joy is not mutual. And here's the hardest truth of all. The more you grow, the more you'll outpace people who secretly need you to stay small. Some of them won't know they resent you. They'll call it drifting apart. They'll say they're just going through something. They'll disappear from the celebration and reappear when you're in pain, because that's the version of you they're comfortable with. Not the you who's rising. Not the you who's glowing. Not the you who's stepping into power. So what do? You observe. You pay attention. You stop begging for enthusiasm. You stop trying to shrink to make others comfortable. You let the silence be loud. You let their energy speak for them. And you remember this: real love doesn't shrink around your growth. It expands with it. If someone cannot rise with you, bless them and keep walking. Because someone else, someone who has done their inner work, someone who doesn't fear your light, they're out there. And when they see you win, they'll cheer like it's their own victory. That's what real support feels like. And once you taste it, you'll never settle for shadowed silence again. Sign number 2. Their advice makes you feel smaller, not stronger. It sounds helpful. That's the trick. It comes wrapped in concern, in soft tones, in the language of just trying to help. But every time they offer you advice, you don't walk away feeling stronger. You walk away feeling smaller. They say things like, "Are you sure that's a good idea? You might be taking on too much. I just don't want you to be disappointed. It's just not very realistic." And on the surface, it seems like they're being reasonable, supportive even. But beneath the surface, there's another current. One you can't name at first. One that leaves you doubting yourself, second-guessing your path, questioning whether you were ever qualified to begin with. That's not love. That's not guidance. That's covert control, disguised as care. Carl Jung would call this masked projection. A person's own fear, doubt, or unresolved insecurity being projected onto you, under the pretense of protection. They'll rarely say it outright. They won't tell you don't chase that dream, or you'll never make it. That would expose the truth too clearly. No, they hide behind subtle warnings, hesitations, and passive comments that plant seeds of doubt inside your spirit. And if you're not careful, you'll water those seeds yourself. You'll internalize their voice as your own. You'll call it being practical, when really, you've just absorbed someone else's fear and mistaken it for wisdom. That's how it works. It's not a loud attack. It's death by 1,000 doubts. And here's the haunting part. They believe they're helping. They may not even be aware of the control behind their words. But Jung would tell us, the unconscious speaks long before the mouth does. When someone hasn't dealt with their own shadow, the part of them that fears failure, that dreads risk, that resents their own limitations, they unconsciously pull others down to the level where they feel safe, not out of cruelty, out of habit, out of fear, out of an internal chaos they can't name, so they try to organize the world outside of them. And who better to organize than you? You, the one growing, expanding, becoming. You, the one stepping into possibility. You are their disruption, because you represent movement, change, courage, and to a mind addicted to safety, that is terrifying. So what do? They advise. They critique your goals under the banner of realism. They poke holes in your excitement with faux wisdom. They plant doubt and call it maturity. And if you call them out, they retreat into defensiveness. I was just trying to help. You're so sensitive. Wow, I can't say anything anymore without it being taken the wrong way. Suddenly, you're the problem. You're the unreasonable one. And now you feel guilty for even noticing what your intuition already knew. This isn't encouragement. It's containment. Because real support doesn't leave you doubting your own instincts. Real love doesn't disguise fear as guidance. When someone truly believes in you, their words breathe life into your spine, not shame into your shoulders. But that's not what this is. This is subtle manipulation, rooted in their need to control what they can't understand. Jung spoke often about this. People who feel internally disoriented tend to externalize their order. They try to manage others because they can't manage themselves. Your path becomes their battleground. Your confidence threatens their illusion of control. So they try to shape you into something more manageable. Not because they hate you, but because your freedom makes them feel trapped. Your clarity makes them feel confused. Your courage makes their fear feel exposed. And what do most people do when they feel exposed? They cover it up. They shift the narrative. They label your vision as naive. Your ambition is reckless. Your instinct is emotional. But here's the truth. Their reaction is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their unresolved fear. And fear, when left in the unconscious, doesn't just stay quiet. It starts to speak through advice, concern, hesitation. It wears the costume of love, but it serves the ego, not the soul. So how do you know if someone's help is actually harm? Pay attention to how you feel after they speak. Do you feel empowered, clearer, energized? Or do you feel drained, discouraged, or unsettled? Does their support make you feel more like yourself or less? Does their advice honor your intuition or make you doubt it? These are not small questions. These are diagnostic tools for the soul. Because in a world full of subtle sabotage, your intuition becomes your shield. And your body knows. It always knows. The tightness in your chest, the sinking in your stomach, the way your voice catches when you try to explain yourself to them. These are signals. Don't ignore them. Jung said that those who seek to control others are often terrified of their own chaos. And when someone repeatedly makes you feel incapable under the guise of caring, you're not imagining it. You're experiencing it. You don't need their permission to trust yourself. You don't need their approval to pursue what calls you. You don't need to keep shrinking just to keep them comfortable. Your dreams do not need to pass through someone else's fear filter to be valid. You are not too much. You are not unrealistic. You are not reckless. You are remembering who you are. So the next time someone offers advice, listen with your gut. Ask yourself, is this rooted in their love or their limitation? And if it's the latter, you don't have to argue. You don't have to prove anything. You simply move anyway. Because the truth is, their fear can't go where your future is taking you. And you're already on your way. Sign number 3. Every conversation turns into a competition. You share something meaningful, a moment of pride, a milestone, a tiny win that took courage to claim. You're not bragging, just opening your heart, hoping the other person will meet you there. But before your words even land, they respond with something about themselves. You got a new job? They once had 3 offers. You just ran your first 5K. They casually mention they used to run half marathons every other weekend. You finish a thought, and instead of presence, you get performance. You feel the energy shift. You didn't ask to be measured, but now you are. And it stings. Not because you want to win, but because you didn't even know you were playing. This is the heartbreak of silent competition. The kind that doesn't shout, but whispers behind every conversation. Carl Jung would tell us, this behavior is the shadow at work. Envy dressed up as dialogue. Insecurity disguised as casual conversation. They can't celebrate you. They can't just be with your joy, because your joy feels like a mirror, and what they see in it isn't flattering. Instead of listening, they pivot. Instead of supporting, they measure. Instead of honoring your truth, they hijack it with their own. It's not a dialogue. It's a subtle duel. You walk away from these interactions feeling like your excitement has been diluted, like your moment has been flattened by comparison, like you were invisible the whole time. But let's be clear, this isn't about you. It's about them. When someone constantly needs to one-up, redirect, or outshine, what they're really saying is, I don't feel enough. Jung taught that when a person cannot face their own inadequacy, they project it outward, trying to reduce others to restore their own sense of worth. And so, instead of meeting you with grace, they meet you with hidden rivalry. They don't say it, but you feel it. You always feel it. And it shows up in all kinds of ways. You mention your promotion. They bring up how bored they were at that same level. You talk about someone you're dating. They suddenly recount how their last partner was more attractive, more successful, more impressive. You say you're learning something new. They smirk and say, "Oh, that's cute. I remember when I used to do that." These moments chip away at your spirit, not because you believe their stories, but because you feel their energy. And that energy says, "You're not allowed to rise without me rising higher." That's not friendship. That's not support. That's emotional arm wrestling, cloaked in a smile. Jung believed that true connection can only happen between two whole selves, not two egos fighting for air, not two shadows wrestling for superiority. And if someone consistently turns your sharing into a scorecard, they're not really seeing you. They're measuring themselves against you. That's why it feels so lonely. Because even when you're in the same room, you're not on the same level of intimacy. You're offering presence. They're offering performance. And it's exhausting. It gets to the point where you start censoring yourself. You stop sharing wins. You dull your light. You shrink your joy so it doesn't trigger their insecurity. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to edit yourself. Not for truth, but for tolerance. That's how you know a relationship has drifted into competitive energy. When you feel you have to dim yourself just to maintain peace. But here's the truth. Peace built on shrinking is not peace. It's self-abandonment. And every time you deny your own brilliance to protect someone else's ego, you reinforce the very dynamic that's draining you. Jung warned that unhealed people will try to keep you trapped in the version of yourself that makes them feel safe. And the version that shines, that evolves, that thrives, that version is a threat. Because it reminds them of the parts they haven't yet embraced in themselves. So how do you know if you're in a space of silent competition? You'll feel it in your nervous system. You'll feel in the tightness in your chest every time you try to speak freely. In the pause before you share something vulnerable. In the strange emptiness you feel after being with them. Like your joy has been drained instead of nourished. That is not love. That is not friendship. That is not support. That is shadow projection. And you are the canvas. But you don't have to carry it. You don't have to match their energy. You don't have to play a game you never signed up for. You can simply choose to walk away from the scoreboard, to stop explaining your wins, to stop minimizing your excitement, to stop asking people who are still battling themselves to celebrate you. Because the truth is, not everyone can. And that's okay. Not everyone will be ready to hold space for your greatness without making it about them. Not everyone will be able to witness your evolution without measuring their own. But someone will. Someone who is rooted in themselves. Someone who has done their work. Someone who hears your joy and feels it. Who meets your rise with reverence, not rivalry. That's the kind of connection your soul deserves. So if you find yourself in relationships where every moment feels like a quiet contest, give yourself permission to stop playing. Because you were never meant to compete for space. You were meant to expand. And the right people, the real ones, will make room for that expansion, not resent it. They'll clap when you rise. They'll sit with your success. They'll hold it with the same tenderness as they do your pain. Because to them, your joy is not a threat, it's a celebration. And those are the people you keep. Everyone else? Let them keep score in silence. You've got better things to grow. Sign number 4. They're never there when it truly matters. You don't need a crowd when things go right. You just need the right few. A handful of people who show up, not because they have to, but because they care. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern with one specific person. They're around for the small talk. They're there when things are casual, light, easy. But when something big happens, when life cracks open, they vanish. They're busy. They forgot. They meant to call. Excuses dressed as apologies. You try not to take it personally. Life gets hectic. People get overwhelmed. You make space for their absence, rationalize their silence. But deep down, a part of you knows, if it mattered to them, they'd have been there. Because the truth is simple. People make time for what matters. And when someone repeatedly fails to show up when you need them most, not once, not twice, but every time, that's not coincidence. That's a revelation. Carl Jung believed the soul senses absence as clearly as presence. And what you're feeling isn't just disappointment. It's grief. Grief for the space you hoped they would hold, but never did. You needed support. They went silent. You needed reassurance. They offered indifference. You shared good news. They reacted with a text. Late, cold, detached. They never explicitly say they don't care. They don't have to. Their absence does all the talking. This is one of the most subtle forms of hidden resentment, the kind that hides not in what they do, but in what they consistently fail to do. They might still label themselves as your friend. They might even insist they love you. But their behavior reveals something else. A quiet disconnection. A passive resistance to your joy, your pain, your growth, your becoming. They're not present when you rise, because your rising threatens them. They're not present when you fall, because your vulnerability makes them uncomfortable. They're not present when you need, because that would require them to care deeply, and caring would require emotional investment, something they're unwilling or unable to give. And this is where it gets even trickier. Sometimes they show up just enough to keep you hopeful. A comment here, a heart emoji there, a vague, "We need to catch up soon." But soon never comes. The conversation never deepens. The support never solidifies. Their presence is like a ghost, just enough to haunt you, but never enough to hold you. And it's exhausting, because it makes you question yourself. Am I asking for too much? Am I being too sensitive? Should I just let it go? But ask yourself this. If the roles were reversed, if they were in need, would you show up? Exactly. So why do you keep justifying their distance? Why do you keep handing them the benefit of the doubt when they keep proving they're not built to hold what you're offering? Jung would say this: the ego will chase what feels familiar, even if it's painful, while the soul craves what is true. And if you're feeling unseen, uncared for, unsupported, that's not your imagination. That's your soul saying this isn't enough anymore. When someone truly loves you, they show up in the moments that count. Not perfectly, not always in the way you expect, but consistently. They show up when it's hard. They show up when it's messy. They show up when you're shining, without shrinking. And they show up when you're struggling, without needing to be asked. Because presence is the purest form of love. But someone who secretly resents you, they withhold that presence, not overtly, not cruelly, but just enough to remind you that their support comes with conditions. Conditions like you don't outgrow them, you don't succeed without them, you don't take up more space than they're comfortable with. And when you do, when you become bigger, louder, truer, they retreat, disguised as busy, masked as distant, but driven by something deeper, an unspoken resentment that they can't bring themselves to admit, even to themselves. So instead of confronting it, they withhold. They miss your milestones. They skip your celebrations. They're sorry they couldn't make it, but not sorry enough to change. And over time, their silence becomes a language of its own. A language that says, I'm not really with you. A language that says, I'm not ready for who you're becoming. A language that says, I've already left, I just never said goodbye. But you don't need to wait for a goodbye to let go. You can release yourself from the grip of their absence. You can stop chasing their validation. You can stop hoping they'll show up in the way your soul needs, because someone else will. Someone who doesn't shrink in your shine. Someone who doesn't ghost when you're grieving. Someone who doesn't ration their care like it's currency. They won't just tell you they love you. They'll show it. Through presence, through showing up, through staying when things get hard, and celebrating when things go right. That's the kind of love you deserve. So if someone has made a habit of not being there, stop making excuses. Start listening to the truth beneath their absence. Because presence isn't complicated. It's not about grand gestures or constant contact. It's about one simple thing. When it matters, are they there? And if they're not, maybe it's time you stop waiting and start walking. Sign number 5. Their concern is really about control. It starts innocently. They ask how you're doing. They check in. They offer guidance. At first, it feels supportive, even caring. But over time, that care begins to feel heavy. Suddenly, every decision you make becomes a topic of critique. Every choice you express is questioned. Every move you make is met with hesitation. Not yours, but theirs. You say you're thinking of starting something new, and they raise their eyebrows. You mention a boundary you've set, and they sigh, "Are you sure that's smart?" You talk about a risk you're taking, and they remind you of everything that could go wrong. It's not just advice anymore. It's not curiosity. It's correct. And if you push back, if you even hint at not needing their input, they get offended, defensive, hurt. "I'm just trying to help," they say. "Why are you being so difficult?" But the truth is, you're not being difficult. You're just not being controlled anymore. Carl Jung understood this dynamic well. He spoke often of people who, unable to face the uncertainty within themselves, project that fear outward by trying to organize and direct the lives of others. They need you to stay on a path they understand, one thing they can manage, one that doesn't challenge their worldview or threaten their sense of identity. So they mask their discomfort with your autonomy as love. They micromanage your life but call it protection. They second-guess your intuition and label it concern. But real love empowers. Real love doesn't need to be managed. Real love trusts you, even when it doesn't understand you. What you're dealing with isn't love, it's covert control. Control draped in care, but rooted in fear. Their fear. Because the more you grow, the more you evolve, the more you live from your inner truth, the less influence they have. And for someone who derives a sense of self-worth from controlling others, your independence feels like abandonment, like betrayal, like rejection. So they push harder. They give more unsolicited advice. They question your judgment. They make you feel like you're not ready, not capable, not grounded enough to make decisions for yourself. You begin to second-guess things you were once certain about. You start asking for their opinion on things that shouldn't need permission. You apologize for your choices, even when you know they're right for you. That's not growth. That's regression. You're not becoming more connected to yourself. You're becoming more dependent on them. That's how covert control works. It disguises itself as closeness, but it actually pulls you away from your own center. And it's insidious, because it doesn't look like abuse. It doesn't sound like manipulation. It sounds like, I just want what's best for you. I know you so well. Trust me on this. I'm only trying to protect you. But protect you from what exactly? From your own intuition? From your own truth? From a path they don't approve of? Jung would say that this is the ego's attempt to preserve its illusion of control, not just over the world, but over the people in it. When someone hasn't integrated their inner chaos, they seek to manage everything around them, including you, especially you. Because you used to let them guide you. You used to lean on their opinions. You used to defer to their sense of right and wrong. But now, something has shifted. You're listening to yourself more. You're taking up space. You're moving in a direction they didn't choose for you. And that, to someone who confuses love with control, feels threatening. So they tighten their grip. They offer more feedback, more critique, more commentary on how you're changing, on how you're not yourself lately, but you are yourself. Perhaps for the first time in years. And the version of you they miss, that was the version they could control. Now you're becoming someone who thinks independently, who questions what no longer fits, who steps into discomfort instead of avoiding it. You're no longer living your life on a leash, and they don't know what to do with that. So they call it rebellion, distance, disrespect. But it's not any of those things. It's liberation. Because love does not require obedience. Support is not supervision. And care is not control. You're not here to live inside someone else's comfort zone. You're not here to abandon your path because it makes others uneasy. You are here to become whole. And wholeness requires agency. The ability to choose, to fail, to learn, to rise, to live without needing constant permission. So if someone's concern constantly leaves you feeling small, incapable, unworthy, that's not concern, that's control. And if they only offer support when you follow their script, that's not support, that's surveillance. The test is simple. Do they honor your autonomy, even when they disagree with your direction? If the answer is no, if their love comes with conditions, their approval tied to compliance, then you're not being loved. You're being managed. And that's not your role. You don't exist to be someone else's project. You don't need to keep explaining your choices to people who aren't ready to see your growth. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit inside their version of safe. Because the truth is, what's safe for them might be stagnant for you. You were made to expand, to break patterns, to walk paths that don't always make sense to others, but feel right in your bones. So trust that. Trust yourself. And trust that those who genuinely care, who actually love you, will never try to control your journey. They will walk beside you, not ahead of you, not above you, but beside you. Because real love doesn't fear your freedom. It celebrates it. Sign number 6. They talk about you behind your back, but smile to your face. Something shifts. You're not sure when or how or even why. But suddenly, people around you seem different. Distant, colder, like something invisible has passed between you, and you weren't told what it was. They stop reaching out as much. They don't laugh as easily. Conversations feel strained. Your presence seems to tighten the air instead of lighten it. And yet, you haven't done anything. At least nothing you're aware of. But someone else has. They've spoken in your absence, shared half-truths, planted doubt. Maybe not outright lies. That would be too obvious. No, it's more subtle. It's a raised eyebrow, a vague comment, a carefully dropped sentence like, "I just worry about them sometimes," or "They're going through a lot." They don't need to say much. The seed is enough. From there, perception does the rest. And before long, you're not just carrying your own truth. You're carrying their narrative about you. Carl Jung called this shadow projection in one of its most dangerous forms. When a person cannot process their resentment, envy, or inadequacy, they offload it onto others. Not through confrontation, but through contamination. They don't come to you directly. That would require honesty, accountability, vulnerability. Instead, they weaponize their words in the shadows. They tell others things they'd never say to your face, and then greet you like nothing happened. That's what makes it so insidious. To your face, they smile. They compliment. They ask about your life. But something feels hollow. Their presence is laced with something you can't name until the day you feel the consequences. And when you find out, when the truth eventually reaches you, it hits hard. Not just because of what they said, but because of who said it. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone close, someone you trusted, someone you opened up to. And they took that closeness and turned it into ammunition. Jung would say this betrayal isn't just personal, it's archetypal. It touches something deep in the human psyche. The pain of being misrepresented, the heartbreak of being unseen, the trauma of being turned into a character in someone else's story, a story written behind closed doors. And make no mistake, when someone gossips about you, especially under the guise of concern, they're not just venting. They're reshaping reality, shaping how others see you without giving you the dignity of defending yourself. They're not seeking resolution. They're seeking validation. They want others to share in their discomfort with you, because that feels safer than facing that discomfort within themselves. So instead of healing, they recruit. And the damage is real. You begin to doubt yourself. You question the integrity of your relationships. You stop trusting your instincts. Because if they could hide their feelings for this long, who else might be doing the same? You start silencing yourself, not out of shame, but out of fear. Fear that anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of someone else's insecurity. And that's how gossip works. Not as a loud explosion, but as a slow erosion. It chips away at connection, at trust, at safety. It isolates you, not just from others, but from yourself. Jung reminds us that gossip reveals far more about the one who speaks than the one who is spoken of. When someone feels small, they try to shrink others. When someone feels powerless, they try to control how they're perceived. But you don't have to internalize their projection. You don't have to take on their unspoken resentment. You don't have to shrink to fit back inside their comfort zone, because their words, no matter how quietly whispered, are not your truth. Your truth is found in how you show up, even when misjudged, in how you remain rooted, even when others try to shake your foundation, in how you choose clarity over chaos, dignity over drama. So what do you do when you realize someone's been talking about you? You see it for what it is, a reflection of their shadow, not a reflection of your worth. You stop chasing the explanation. You stop demanding closure. You stop asking people who hide in gossip to meet you in honesty. Because they can't. They don't have the emotional maturity to bring their discomfort directly to you. So they take the long way around, the coward's route, the one paved with rumor and subtle sabotage. But you don't need to match their energy. You rise. You protect your peace. You grieve the version of the relationship you thought you had. And then you move forward, clearer than before. And if people walk away because of what they heard, without ever asking you what's true, let them go. Anyone who can be swayed by gossip was never truly rooted in a relationship. You deserve connections that are built on presence, not performance. Loyalty, not convenience. Truth, not triangulation. And the people who are meant for you, they won't entertain whispers behind your back. They'll shut it down. They'll come to you. They'll hold space for your humanity, not sell it for attention. Because in a world full of surface-level alliances, real friendship is rebellion. So hold your head high. Let their gossip be their mirror, not your reflection. You don't need to defend your name to those who have already chosen a narrative without asking you. You just keep walking in your truth. And let your presence, your integrity, your groundedness, your authenticity speak louder than anything they could ever say in your absence. Sign number 7. They diminish your achievements, even when they pretend not to. You've worked for this. You've stretched, struggled, grown. Maybe it took years. Maybe it was just a small win. But to you, it mattered. So you share it. You tell them with genuine excitement, hoping they'll see what it took, feel the weight of your effort, and join you in celebrating this moment. But instead of joy, you get something else. A shrug, a half smile, a delayed, nice, or worse, a comparison. You say, I finally launched my project. And they reply, yeah, everyone's doing that these days. You share, I got promoted. And they say, well, that's just corporate politics. You tell them, I've been running every morning. And they respond, wait till you hit 40. That'll stop. You weren't expecting fireworks. You weren't asking for applause. But what you didn't expect was dismissal. And while they might not say anything overtly cruel, there's a coldness there. A subtle undertone of, it's not that special. A passive attempt to bring your joy back down to a level they can tolerate. Carl Jung would tell us, this isn't about your success. It's about their shame. When someone hasn't confronted their own sense of inadequacy, they can't bear to see others surpass the version of life they've resigned themselves to. So instead of rising with you, they reduce what you've done. Not because you failed, but because you didn't. You dared. You tried. You finished. You achieved. And that confronts something in them, something they'd rather not face. So they mask it. They hide behind sarcasm, behind realism, behind just being honest. But what they're really doing is projecting their own fear of failure onto your breakthrough. You can feel it. It's in the way they change the subject, in the way their voice gets flat, in the way they can't hold eye contact when you speak with pride. And if they do acknowledge your success, it feels forced, rushed, like they're checking off a box, as if by congratulating you, they're doing you a favor, not sharing in your joy. It's subtle. That's what makes it so painful, because it leaves you confused. You start questioning your own worthiness. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I should tone it down. But here's the truth. You shouldn't have to shrink just to make someone else feel more comfortable, especially not with someone who calls themselves a friend, a partner, a supporter. Real support doesn't flinch in the face of your expansion. It doesn't rush to change the subject when you shine. It doesn't twist joy into competition. Real support pauses to feel your pride. It holds space. It says, tell me more. I'm proud of you. Even when the win is small. Even when the season is messy. Even when they don't understand it fully. They trust that it's sacred to you. But someone who secretly resents you, they can't celebrate what they haven't allowed themselves to pursue. Your progress feels personal to them. Your effort feels like exposure. Your momentum threatens their stagnation. So instead of confronting their own stuckness, they minimize your movement. It's not always mean, but it's always telling. Jung believed that the shadow, the unacknowledged, repressed parts of the self, finds its way out in moments like these. When someone can't clap for you, it's because your success reveals the shadow they've buried. And instead of doing the hard work of meeting it, they project it. So what do? They make little comments. They joke at your expense. They give backhanded compliments like, wow, I didn't think you had it in you. They act like they're lifting you up, while gently, subtly pulling you down. And over time, it wears on you. You find yourself hesitating to share good news. You downplay your own excitement. You tell them last, or not at all. You internalize their indifference as a sign you're too much. But you're not too much. You're just evolving beyond what they're ready to accept. And that's not your fault. You're allowed to feel proud. You're allowed to take up space in your own joy. You're allowed to share your light and expect it to be received with love, not resentment. So pay attention to the energy people bring when you shine. Do they lean in? Do they light up with you? Or do they pull away? Emotionally, mentally, physically? Because someone who genuinely loves you will celebrate your elevation, even if they're still finding their own. They won't make it about them. They won't redirect the spotlight. They won't act like your win is an inconvenience to their ego. They'll be there, fully, present, glad. Because that's what real connection looks like. So if someone keeps minimizing what matters to you, don't waste time over-explaining. Don't dull yourself to fit their unresolved wounds. Don't seek validation from a source that can only offer resistance. Just recognize it for what it is, a reflection of them, not a rejection of you. And move forward with your head high. Because you don't owe your silence to anyone threatened by your voice. You don't owe your stillness to those who can't handle your momentum. And you don't owe your dimming to people who haven't learned how to hold light without casting shadows. Celebrate anyway. Speak your win anyway. Shine anyway. Because if someone can't meet you in joy, they were never meant to walk with you into greatness. Sign number 8. Their body betrays what their words try to hide. Words can lie, smiles can deceive, but the body never lies. You know the feeling. You're sharing something, a success, a new idea, a personal truth. The person across from you is smiling, nodding, and saying all the right things. But something doesn't feel right. Their posture stiffens. Their jaw clenches. Their eyes dart away for just a second too long. Their voice lifts in pitch, just slightly, like they're trying too hard to sound happy for you. They say, "I'm happy for you," but your gut says, "No, they're not." You don't have proof, nothing explicit, but you can feel it, like a drop in pressure before a storm. You leave the conversation more confused than when you entered. Something in you whispers, "That was off." That whisper? That's your nervous system doing what it was built to do. Detect subtle threat, not physical, emotional. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious communicates most clearly through the body. The micro expressions, the energy shifts, the subtle tension. These are the fingerprints of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we try to suppress, but which always find a way out. When someone harbors resentment, jealousy, or unspoken dislike, it leaks through their gestures. The way they cross their arms when you speak. The way they flinch when you mention something good. The way they avoid eye contact during moments that matter. They may not even be aware of it. That's what makes it real. Because when a person hasn't processed their shadow, their body becomes the battleground between what they want to feel and what they actually feel. They want to be happy for you, but they're not. They want to feel proud of you, but they can't. They want to be supportive, but their body tells the truth they won't say out loud. And you feel it every single time. You feel the tension when they hug you, how it lingers just a second too short. You feel the way they pull back when you speak too confidently. You feel the way their laughter tightens instead of expands. You've spent your whole life learning to read emotional cues, especially the ones unspoken. You know when someone is with you in spirit and when they're just pretending to be. And when that pretense becomes a pattern, it starts to erode your sense of safety. You begin to second-guess your instincts. You question whether you're imagining it. You tell yourself, they didn't say anything wrong. But that's the thing. They don't have to. Because the body always says what the ego won't admit. It's in the forced smile, the sudden fidgeting, the moment they jokingly insult you, but their eyes don't soften. It's in the silence after you speak. Too long, too awkward, too full of things unsaid. And when you bring it up, they deny it. What are you talking about? You're overanalyzing. I didn't mean anything by it. And maybe they didn't. But Jung would say, intention doesn't erase impact. The unconscious doesn't wait for permission. It speaks, with or without awareness. So what do you do when someone's body keeps telling you a truth their mouth refuses to own? You believe it. You stop silencing your instincts in favor of their surface-level words. You stop gaslighting yourself into accepting relationships that feel energetically wrong. Because you know. You've always known. You may not be able to articulate why. You may not have the evidence others would accept. But your body has been keeping score. And it's tired of carrying the weight of that misalignment. When someone is secretly resentful, they won't always argue with you. They won't always lash out. They may never even speak a single unkind word. But their body, their subtle gestures, their tone, their facial expressions will begin to reflect the inner split. The part of them that wants to stay connected, and the part of them that's already drifting. And you, as the sensitive one, the attuned one, the emotionally intelligent one, you'll feel it all. Jung believed that when people suppress the darker parts of themselves, they create a fracture, a tension that eventually spills into their relationships. That tension is felt most clearly through the unspoken. So don't underestimate a sigh, a stiff shoulder, a delayed pause. Don't dismiss the feeling that something isn't matching when their words say, I support you, but their face says, I resent you. Trust your body. It was built to protect you, not just from danger, but from disconnection. And sometimes, disconnection doesn't come in the form of betrayal or cruelty. Sometimes it comes in the form of false closeness, a smile that isn't real, a hug that's half-hearted, a compliment that tastes hollow. So here's your permission. You don't need them to say the wrong thing in order for you to walk away. Their energy has said enough. Your intuition has said enough. Their body has said what their ego won't. That something deeper is out of alignment. And your job isn't to fix them, or confront them, or squeeze yourself into a version they can pretend to like. Your job is to protect your peace, to honor your knowing, to believe what your gut told you the first time. They're not for you anymore. And that's okay. Because what you're really mourning isn't the loss of the person. It's the loss of the illusion that they were ever fully with you to begin with. So exhale. Let their unspoken truth remain theirs. And go where the smiles are real, where the hugs are whole, where the joy in their eyes matches the light in yours. because you deserve to be felt, not just heard, seen, not just tolerated, loved, with nothing to hide. Sign number 9. You feel like you have to shrink around them. You don't know exactly when it started. It wasn't one big moment. It was subtle, gradual, almost invisible. One day, you realized you weren't talking about your dreams anymore. You weren't sharing your accomplishments. You were holding back your personality, your ideas, your fire, just to keep the peace. Not because they told you to, but because something in you knew they couldn't handle all of you. So you started editing yourself, making your words smaller, making your presence lighter, turning the volume down on the parts of you that once felt loud and alive. And at first, it seemed like self-awareness, but over time, it felt like suffocation. Carl Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what happens when becoming who you truly are makes someone close to you uncomfortable? What happens when your growth doesn't inspire them, but threatens them? You start to notice how they flinch when you speak with confidence, how their eyes glaze over when you talk about things that excite you. They seem more comfortable when you're uncertain, insecure, or struggling. It's like they're only relaxed when you're playing small. And suddenly, your light feels like a problem. So you begin to dim it, not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. You laugh a little less loudly. You downplay your good news. You second-guess your opinions. You hesitate to take up space. You shrink, and they never have to say a word. Their energy does all the work. A sigh, a side glance, an eye roll, a quiet dismissal. It's enough to remind you, this version of you makes them uncomfortable. And maybe they don't mean to do it. Maybe it's unconscious. Maybe it's their own insecurity. Maybe they've never learned how to stand beside someone who's growing without seeing it as a reflection of what they haven't done. But intention doesn't erase the impact, because now your nervous system associates their presence with self-censorship. And that's not connection, that's control. Jung believed that the unintegrated shadow doesn't always show up as aggression. Sometimes it shows up as discomfort with someone else's wholeness. When a person hasn't accepted their own power, they unconsciously resent others who have. So, if you've ever felt smaller around someone who claims to love you, don't ignore that. It's not your imagination. It's your intuition saying, they only feel safe when I stay limited. And maybe it's not just about success. Maybe you feel like you can't cry around them, can't be spiritual, can't be weird, can't ask deep questions, can't say no, can't set boundaries, can't express your needs without being made to feel needy. Because every time you try, they act like you're too much, too emotional, too intense, too deep, too ambitious, too you. And so you fold. You water yourself down. You quiet the parts of you that feel inconvenient. But here's the truth. You were not born to be digestible. You were not made to be palatable for people who refuse to stretch. You are not too much. You're just in the wrong room. And if someone can only feel comfortable when you're uncomfortable in your own skin, that's not love. That's ego preservation. That's projection. That's shadow resistance. Because when someone loves you, they don't need you to be smaller. They don't need you to dilute yourself. They don't need you to apologize for your brilliance, your evolution, or your truth. They make room for your voice, your emotions, your wins, your questions, your becoming. They don't sit in your light with sunglasses. They sit beside it and bask, even when it's bright. So if you feel like you have to shrink to be accepted, that's not love. That's conditioning. And you are allowed to unlearn it. You are allowed to be your full self. You are allowed to speak without measuring, to laugh without lowering your volume, to take up space without guilt. Because the people who truly belong in your life will never see your fullness as a threat. They will see it as a gift. Jung said that becoming whole is not about perfection. It's about integration. It's about reclaiming every part of yourself that you were once told was too much. And sometimes the most radical act of healing is to stop shrinking in rooms that were never built for your size in the first place. So look around. Do you feel expanded here or contracted? Do you feel safe to show up or scared to stand out? Do you feel encouraged or exhausted? Your body knows the difference. Your spirit knows the difference. And it's not selfish to choose spaces where you don't have to fragment yourself just to be tolerated. It's sacred. Because the truth is, your full self is not a burden. It's a blueprint, a map back to your essence. And anyone who truly loves you won't flinch when you unfold. They'll stay. They'll listen. They'll grow with you. And if they can't, let them stay behind. Your soul's expansion was never meant to be squeezed into someone else's comfort zone. You are here to take up space. So stand tall. Speak freely. Shine unapologetically. And trust that the people meant for you will never ask you to shrink. Sign number 10. They celebrate your struggles more than your successes. Not every friend in your life is there to see you rise. Some are there only for the part of your story where you're still crawling, still doubting, still searching. Because in those moments when you're broken, confused, or uncertain, they feel close to you, needed, important, maybe even superior. But the moment you begin to stand, to heal, to believe in yourself again, the energy shifts. They're not as responsive, not as engaged. Suddenly, the bond feels thinner. The connection is less magnetic. You might even hear them say things like, "You've changed. You're not as humble anymore." Don't forget where you came from. At first, you think it's a concern, maybe a misunderstanding. But as time goes on, you realize they were more comfortable with your pain than your power. Carl Jung believed that people are often unconsciously drawn to others not because of love, but because of reflection. They see themselves in you, in your wounds, in your struggles, in the ways you play small. And when you start to heal, when do you begin to step into a new identity? It threatens the reflection. Because now, you're no longer the version of yourself that made them feel whole. You're no longer the underdog they could root for from a higher place. You're becoming someone who no longer needs saving. And that scares people who built their identity on helping you. So they pull back. Or worse, they subtly start to root for your failure. They don't say it outright, but you feel it in the way they seem energized when something goes wrong for you, in how quickly they show up when you're struggling, and how slowly they appear when you're thriving. They bring food when your heart is broken. They check in when you're lost. They offer advice when you're doubting everything. But when you finally get the job, when does the relationship start to bloom? When will your light come back on? Crickets. They say, "That's great." But their eyes don't smile. They respond, "So happy for you." But the text feels cold. They say the right words, but you can feel the absence of joy. It's subtle, but undeniable. They're more available for your weakness than your strength. And that is not love. That is ego. That is identity-based attachment. Because for some people, your brokenness made them feel useful. Your confusion gave them a role. Your pain made space for their significance. And when that pain starts to leave, so do they. Jung called this the collapse of projection. When someone's image of you no longer matches your truth, and instead of updating their lens, they reject the change. They don't want you. They want the version of you that made them feel needed, valuable, safe. They don't know how to love you when you're strong, when you're radiant, when you're rooted, because that version doesn't orbit around them anymore. And that is deeply confronting to someone whose love was really about control, superiority, or emotional dependency. So they subtly shift the narrative. They start to critique the new you. You're so full of yourself now. Don't let success change you. Remember who was there for you before all this. It's not a concern. It's resentment wrapped in nostalgia. A covert attempt to pull you back into a version of yourself they could manage. But here's the truth. You don't owe your struggle to anyone. You don't have to keep hurting just to keep others comfortable. You don't have to dim your joy to stay relatable. You don't have to pretend you're still lost when you finally found your way. You are allowed to evolve, even if that means some people stop clapping. You are allowed to be proud, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You are allowed to be seen, fully, wildly, unapologetically, without shrinking into old pain just to make someone else feel okay. Because real love doesn't need you to suffer. Real love isn't threatened by your healing. Real love celebrates your rising, not just your recovery. So pay attention to who shows up when you're in bloom. Who calls when things are good? Who listens with their heart when you're thriving, not just when you're bleeding? Because that's the real test. Anyone can show up for your pain. It makes them feel useful. But who stays when you're powerful? Who stays when you're shining so brightly that they have to face their own dimness? That's who's real. Jung believed that true connection requires two whole people, not one who's broken and one who's fixing, not one who's shining and one who's hiding, but two souls standing side by side, holding space for each other's light. So don't apologize for your joy. Don't downplay your healing. Don't hide your glow just to preserve someone else's shadow. Let your evolution offend the people who preferred your pain. Let it push away the ones who were only loyal to your limitations, because the people who are truly meant for you the ones who love from their wholeness, not their wounds. They will celebrate every part of you, especially the part you fought hardest to become. So rise anyway, laugh anyway, succeed anyway, heal anyway, because you never have to dim your light to keep someone who was never meant to stand in your sun. If this message spoke to something deep within you, something you've always felt but never had the words for, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with the friend who's healing, with the version of you who once stayed small. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more soul-shifting truths inspired by Carl Jung and the journey back to the self. Your healing is not a solo mission. It's a ripple. And the more we awaken together, the more we begin to remember. The light was never too bright. The room was just too dark.